Today's reading begins in Deuteronomy chapter 33, starting in verse 1. This is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. He said, "The Lord came from Sinai and rose from Seir to them. He shone from Mount Paran. He came from the 10,000s of holy ones. At his right hand was a fiery law for them. Yes, he loves the people. All his saints are in your hand. They sat down at your feet. Each receives your words. Moses commanded us a law, an inheritance for the assembly of Jacob. He was king in Jeshurun when the heads of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together. Let Reuben live and not die, nor let his men be few. This is for Judah. He said, Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah. Bring him in to his people. With his hands he contended for himself. You shall be a help against his adversaries. About Levi, he said, Your Thummim and your Urim are with your godly one, whom you proved at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah. He said of his father and of his mother, I have not seen him. He didn't acknowledge his brothers, nor did he know his own children, for they have observed your word, and keep your covenant. They shall teach Jacob your ordinances, and Israel your law. They shall put incense before you, the whole burnt offering on your altar. Lord, bless his skills. Accept the work of his hands. Strike through the hips of those who rise up against him, of those who hate him, that they not rise again. About Benjamin, he said, The beloved of the Lord will dwell in safety by him. He covers him all day long. He dwells between his shoulders. About Joseph, he said, His land is blessed by the Lord, for the precious things of the heavens, for the dew, for the deep that couches beneath, for the precious things of the fruits of the sun, for the precious things that the moon can yield, for the precious things of the ancient mountains, for the precious things of the everlasting hills, for the precious things of the earth and its fullness, the good will of him who lived in the bush. Let this come on the head of Joseph, on the crown of the head of him who is separated from his brothers. Majesty belongs to the firstborn of his herd. His horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he will push all the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim. They are the thousands of Manasseh. About Zebulun, he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. They will call the peoples to the mountain. There they will offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they will draw out the abundance of the seas, the hidden treasures of the sand. About Gad, he said, He who enlarges Gad is blessed. He dwells as a lioness, and tears the arm and the crown of the head. He provided the first part for himself, for the lawgiver's portion was reserved for him. He came with the heads of the people. He executed the righteousness of the Lord, his ordinances with Israel. About Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's cub that leaps out of Bashan. About Naphtali, he said, Naphtali, satisfied with favor, full of the Lord's blessing, possessed the west and the south. About Asher, he said, Asher is blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brothers. Let him dip his foot in oil. Your bars will be iron and bronze. As your days, so your strength will be. There is no one like God, Jeshurun, who rides on the heavens for your help, in his excellency on the skies. The eternal God is your dwelling place. Underneath are the everlasting arms. He thrust out the enemy from before you and said, Destroy. Israel dwells in safety, the fountain of Jacob alone, in a land of grain and new wine. Yes, his heavens drop down dew. You are happy, Israel. Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, the sword of your excellency? Your enemies will submit themselves to you. You will tread on their high places. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, starting in verse 1. Now there were some present at the same time who told him, that is Jesus, about the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Jesus answered them, Do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans, because they suffered such things? I tell you, no, but unless you repent, you will all perish in the same way. Or those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them? Do you think that they were worse offenders than all the men who dwell in Jerusalem? I tell you, no, but unless you repent, you will all perish in the same way. He spoke this parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it, and found none. He said to the vine dresser, Behold, these 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and found none. Cut it down. Why does it waste the soil? He answered, Lord, leave it alone this year also, until I dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit, fine, but if not, after that you can cut it down. He was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath day. Behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years. She was bent over and could in no way straighten herself up. When Jesus saw her, he called her and said to her, Woman, you are freed from your infirmity. He laid his hands on her, and immediately she stood up straight and glorified God. The ruler of the synagogue, being indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the multitude, There are 6 days in which men ought to work. Therefore come on those days and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. Therefore the Lord answered him, You hypocrites! Doesn't each one of you free his ox or his donkey from the stall on the Sabbath, and lead him away to water? Ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound 18 long years, be freed from this bondage on the Sabbath day? As he said these things, all his adversaries were disappointed, and all the multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. He said, What is God's kingdom like? To what shall I compare it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and put in his own garden. It grew and became a large tree, and the birds of the sky live in its branches. Again he said, To what shall I compare God's kingdom? It is like yeast, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour, until it was all leavened. Psalm 78, beginning in verse 65. Then the Lord awakened as one out of sleep, like a mighty man who shouts by reason of wine. He struck his adversaries backward. He put them to a perpetual reproach. Moreover, he rejected the tent of Joseph, and didn't choose the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth which he has established forever. He also chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. From following the ewes that have their young, he brought him to be the shepherd of Jacob, his people, and Israel, his inheritance. So he was their shepherd, according to the integrity of his heart, and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a kind word makes it glad.